Men are not inaccurate when they make the claim that, on average, women tend to be more left-wing, they tend to be more into progressive politics, they tend to be more into so-called wokeness. And that's absolutely accurate in general, for the most part. But there is a contingent of females that operate somewhat differently. And I find this very fascinating. So let's get into this. So originally, a lot of the things, as you well know, that we cherish, that we appreciate, video games, popular entertainment culture, things of that nature, were primarily a male thing. So Star Wars is a good example of this. All the high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, etc., etc. That's not to say that there were never females involved or interested. It's just they were not especially interested on average, right? And that's absolutely true of role-playing games, too, with all the stats and the details. They just weren't interested in that. But as time progressed, more and more companies, particularly BioWare, got interested in attracting a female audience. And so they created what females like, romance options. They really stressed romance, interpersonal relationships, things that women are interested in, on average. Not so much men compared to women. And so they got more and more women involved in BioWare games. I can think of Dragon Age or Mass Effect. Sure, Mass Effect has cool guns and combat and all that, but it isn't just that. And there are a lot of interpersonal relationships, and women love that sort of thing. But as we know with progressivism, and something I've stated many, many times throughout the years, it's basically in the word, right? Progressivism. You always have to progress forward. You can't say, we've achieved X, it's enough, let's wait and see. Got to achieve X, Y, Z, and then redo the alphabet. No pun intended there. And so, yes, these days there is a kind of old guard female that wanted in on all the action, so to speak, the things, the cool stuff, right? They didn't want the boys' clubs. They wanted to take part in the things that men got access to. But they didn't like all the other stuff that followed, the attendant consequences of progressive culture and politics, i.e. the progressive stack. More specifically, wokeism. So I've noticed a very interesting trend in recent years, above all in the case of individuals who are not sure what they actually are psychologically. Competing in sports, for example, there's a lot of controversy around there, being that if you were born X and then participate in Y, it tends to create a problem. You know what I mean. And there are a lot of women who were born as such, they're kind of upset about that. But specifically in the realm of entertainment, there's a type of female I've noticed that really likes getting catered to. The type of female that BioWare, I would argue, ushered in, not just BioWare, but a lot of games, but specifically BioWare. They were kind of the harbingers of this particular apocalypse, you could say, that really liked the kind of mushy interpersonal relationships, and they really liked hot guys, right? A very famous character in this case is Alistair of Dragon Age Origins. He's this sort of fumbling but really Chad-looking guy, charming, blah, blah, blah. Women just adore the guy. But there's this older contingent of females, I notice, who want all the goodies for themselves, but then, it's fascinating, get annoyed when there are gay romances or gay elements in games or in shows. Most recently, I was listening to a video by a female who quite literally, at least partly for a living, writes erotic straight female fan fiction of various games or what have you, and sells it, and has a Patreon and the whole shebang, getting upset about gender and inclusion in a show that is based off of the Dragon Age series. You'd think that they would love that, because these were the people that were spearheading all the mushy female romances and character interactions 12, 15, 20 years ago, but not so much. In particular, she was annoyed that the protagonist was a lesbian with an attractive lesbian girlfriend. And she didn't really like that. Because none of the main characters in the show are actually straight, she was really bothered by that. Personally, at this stage, I just don't care. I'm so numb to everything, it doesn't really matter to me. If the story is halfway decent, which it was okay-ish in this case, whatever. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the progressive stack isn't really a stack, because there's a lot of internal conflict between the individuals who are professing these beliefs. The people who want X but don't necessarily want Y. The people who want X, Y but don't necessarily want Z. And the people who might want X, Y, Z but don't necessarily want to redo or recount the entire alphabet. There are a lot of those. Because what's happened in recent years is this illusion and simultaneously a delusion that everyone is on board with everything and everyone's on the same team, right? If you're progressive, you just believe in everything across the board. Part of this is the attempt to project an illusion of power on some level, a so-called united front when it's anything but. This idea that everyone's on the same team, even though they might not be, especially against the evil quote-unquote right. But you should have seen just how angry this woman was. And I've seen similar such posts, never in videos, but posts on Reddit made by women who no longer feel that they're getting catered to. So ultimately, what's really at stake here, at least for these individuals, is that they feel that they're not getting all the cool stuff that they wanted for themselves. And you understand, of course, how the typical female mentality works. It's a kind of semi-solipsistic view of the world. So, sure, as a guy, there are no guy spaces anymore. Video games, particularly RPGs, don't sort of cater to male interests, at least as much as they used to. But woe betide those who don't allow straight females to get exactly what they want, what they're entitled to. And it's really, really fascinating. I've seen the same thing happen, by the way, in the alliance between straight women and gay men, which is a very tenuous one. I've talked about this in the past on occasion. It's not like they're rock solid allies because they actually have different goals and different interests. It just seems that way. Part of this, I've noticed, is very much generational. So it's typically women who are millennial or older who aren't down necessarily with the Wokerati, which is to say not down with the Wokerati in as much as their own interests aren't being catered to. They get annoyed by the insertion of alphabet characters in various games and or serious films, but the youngest generation has no problem with that. And here we can really see how there's been a massive cultural shift within one generation between people who are only slightly older and people who are only slightly younger. So, for example, you'll notice that almost exclusively to a T, if you ever run around the internet and see people with the extra addition and clamors of pronouns of how they identify themselves, even if it's patently obvious, even if they are not necessarily actively involved in it, they'll call themselves they, she, they, he, whatever, right? They're almost exclusively under the age of 25, right? So the uniformity that we perceive in the progressive stack, culturally speaking, is largely uniformity within a certain generation, as opposed to intergenerational, it's just one type of politics, blah, blah, blah. And it just transcends all of that. The people who believe in the entire alphabet confederation, the people who believe that it's a net good to have certain types of characters in certain types of entertainment just for the sake of having them, that typically overwhelmingly is the younger generation. But it's a bit of sour grapes, right? I mean, men all the time are accused of sour grapes because they don't get their cool stuff. And women and others will sometimes laugh at men about how men are getting their comeuppance. Well, now straight women are kind of getting their comeuppance and they don't like it. But make no mistake, they're not actually allied necessarily with male interests. They're just pissed off at the particular sphere of interest, which is quite different. But it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves as we all get older and as the Zoomers become basically the predominant organism in the culture and society. Because I'd argue they already are, and their culture, their politics, their opinions and views dominate everything. And you're going to see a lot of estrangement even amongst people who formerly thought of themselves as progressive, as believing the principles, as belonging to this group of people. They will see themselves as being outsiders, as I've observed and pointed out today. So if you think the Wokerati has reached its apogee in terms of influence and reach and what they want, I think you have another thing coming for you. Anyway, as always, thanks for tuning in. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. May the gods watch over you. Take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.